This is the Devinci Chainsaw Enduro. If you didn't already see it, check out the Chainsaw DH video on my channel. But since they got me that bike, I figured I'd swap out some parts and see how it works as a trail bike. I already got quite a few good rides in on it, and now I'm gonna ride just my usual trails, see how it feels. But let's start with how this big boy climbs. It very much has new geometry. Like, you are seated right where you want to be. The bike goes around switchbacks no problem. It's just planted with plenty of traction. I was surprised the high pivot really doesn't seem too active on the climbs. I've only locked it out to see how the lockout feels, and it's not really something I feel is necessary at this point. That said, this bike is heavy. The stock build with GX, I believe they claim, is a bit over 37 pounds. I built this up a bit nicer, but I would be surprised if it weighed less than 37 pounds. I'll weigh it sometime, and I'll try to throw that in the review. But for now, that's what I gotta say. It climbs extremely well for a 170 high pivot bike, but it is heavy and it is noticeable. And here are my standard test track switchbacks. We'll see what it does on these. But like I said before, I've been really impressed how well it does some pretty tight switchbacks for being such a long and slack bike. I'm gonna soft pedal for a second, because this is the hard one coming up. It's a little wet today. Also makes this bike feel heavy, but it's also grippy. Oh man, that was a lot of work, but it did it first try. So I like that. I have, of all the new geometry bikes, the only thing I've had to try more than once was the Transition Patrol. But as far as effort goes, that was definitely on the upper end of effort. Whew. So, just gonna keep pedaling uphill. So I weighed the bike, and it's 38 pounds, and you can feel it. With the super steep C-tube, the climbing position was super comfy and very upright. That won't be for everyone, but the weight on the front wheel was still very good. That did make it a bit arduous and slow around switchbacks. Traction everywhere was great, and the efficiency felt really good. Riding from Seattle to Squamish, the Chainsaw is great. Around the Pacific Northwest, we have many dedicated climbing trails and service roads. It made quick work of those, and the weight was less noticeable. However, I rode the Chainsaw from Kenosha Pass to Georgia Pass on the Colorado Trail. Riding with friends on steep and loose terrain, the weight wasn't to be forgotten. Overall, traction and efficiency on the climbs was great, but you won't forget the weight on the steeps and around switchbacks. I swapped some parts from my Transition Spire to the Devinci Chainsaw DH to make it an enduro bike. Now equipped with a 170 Fox Factory 38 and a Bontrager Line Pro carbon front wheel, Exo Eagle shifter, and a Fox 200mm transfer dropper post. Altogether, that made for a 38-pound enduro bike. Well, we should still probably just call it a Freeride bike. And we're here. Now that that's over, let's talk about why you should buy this bike. I've talked about confidence-inspiring bikes, but the Chainsaw takes that up a notch. Some bikes are inspiring for speed,
some for steeps, and other bikes like jumps and features. Well, the Chainsaw wants it all. It's crazy stable at speed, it loves getting off the ground, and is unflappable on big jumps. It also doesn't have the numb or dead sailor feel in the air. It wants to be sideways, and if you fail to pull it back, well, it saved me more than once. I've never worried much about the big rear wheel, but set up as a mullet, this bike feels better on the steeps than anything I've ridden, even the Trek Session that was also set up with mixed wheels. The shorter rear end also keeps it maneuverable at slow speeds. The braking control I've been working on since my ride with Johan has gotten easier and become nearly second nature. Is that the bike or just my new Focus? I can confidently say both. Specifically on slabs, the brake control is mostly done through the front, and that is more up to the geometry and technique. On the other hand, in steep chutes and loamy runs, you feel the rear suspension staying active even under hard braking, and the wheel does a better job of tracking the ground.
All right, this one is not for the faint of heart. So we are gonna creep in. It is just a little bit slimy, not bad. Able to control most of my speed. Not quite. Got a little double here. Woo! Good start. Got a little slab here. Yeah, it goes super well.
Lastly, on the descents corner. This bike has no business cornering this well. I think it's a matter of the shortest rear end and the 27.5-inch wheel. Traction I've already mentioned also allows you to really push through the corners, almost like surfing. I noted that other mixed wheel bikes corner well, but some tend to hop out of the corner and can cross you up. But the Chainsaw didn't suffer from it. It held traction even when crossing up, and when you pushed into it, you consistently sprang out of the corner with more speed. Bikes have gotten stiffer, generally for the benefit of the rider, but not always. With the Chainsaw, you can feel just enough forgiveness when it came to landing sideways and overcooking those turns. This was definitely the first bike where I've noticed that flex, and it didn't come across as concerning.
A rodeo rose it is. Whew. Loving the sun.
Generally, for a trail bike, I really want in-frame storage and maybe a few less LBs. But everything else about the Chainsaw is exactly what I'm looking for in my everyday rig. So who is this bike for? I mentioned it in the DH review, but this bike is the one bike quiver for gravity riders. It pedals everywhere, though you won't win any XC races, but Enduro or DH, it'll do both. Especially if you have a little time, throw a dual crown on for the park and there is nothing that can hold you back. For the rider on a budget, but with big gravity dreams, you can't go wrong. And if you have the cash, buy two, one for the park and one for the trail. That may be going a bit far.
Whew. Well, I'm out here alone, and this is only my second time ever on this trail, so I'm not gonna do all the features I did last time, mainly because they scared me. Oh, whew, a little rough today.
Final thoughts. The Devinci Chainsaw is a Freeride bike, plain and simple. If that's what you're looking for, look no further. If you're going out there to find a certain feature or conquer a demon, this is the bike I want to be on. It practically slowed down the moves, and it felt like I had so much more control. It's not slacker than the Sentinel I'd been riding, but it has better traction, especially under braking.
Yeah.
The suspension is the big story here. I've decided to keep the Chainsaw as my enduro bike for the winter, and come summer, we'll probably get rid of the Session in favor of the Chainsaw for the bike park season. I'm sold and stoked to be supporting a Canadian company that manufactures in Canada.
That one was a bit close.